Hello. In this use case, I am going to present you a solution with ARCAD tools which will allow you to automate the generation of sampled and anonymized data from your production environments and to make this test data available to your testers on the cloud or also on a data center if you prefer. For this solution, we used 3 tools from the ARCAD catalog. .extract, our data extraction tool. .anonymizer, to anonymize your personal data. And the third tool is Drops, our application deployment orchestrator. Then how? It's simple. Drops will orchestrate and control everything. It will do this in 3 steps. First, Drops will instantiate and provision an infrastructure on the cloud to be able to receive your test data. For this video, I chose to do this instantiation on the Azure cloud. The second step is to build up this test database with anonymized production data extracts. And the third step is the deployment of the new release, and this is the heart of the business of Drops. Today I will only focus on the deployment of a database component, but Drops allows you to deploy applications and therefore to deploy all types of components. I come back to the first step, the instantiation and provisioning of an infrastructure on Azure, and what you see on the screen is the Drops template for instantiation on Azure. We find the Azure subscription. The resource group where we will create the infrastructure here is Drops TDM. And we also specify the Azure ARM template to use. There I chose an ARM template which creates a Linux infrastructure and also provisions a PostgreSQL database since my production is also on PostgreSQL. I move on to the second step where we will build up the test database. Same here, it's Drops that will drive everything. It will launch the .extract commands to extract the production data. If we take a look at the production database, we have the customers table with personal data on a few fields, and these customers are from several countries. We also have other tables with data related to these customers, for example, the orders table with a total of 2,155 lines of orders. So with .extract I'm going to do an extraction with a simple filter that's customers from France, but we can also use more complex filters with joins, for example. Here is the result of this extraction. We have 11 customers from France, but also all the data related to these 11 people. For example, in the order table we see that 9% of the data has also been extracted. These data will then be injected into a temporary database that Drops will create also. Then Drops will launch the .anonymizer commands to anonymize this data before injecting it into the test database on Azure already provisioned. Here we see an example of an anonymization project. We find the tables to anonymize, the fields that contain personal data, and the rules to use to anonymize these fields. Here, for example, I have chosen to anonymize the first and last names randomly with French first and last names from a directory. I will replace the addresses with stars and the telephone numbers with random French telephone numbers. I am now going to deploy the new release with Drops, so here we are going to deploy the database update resources that we are going to import. But we also have the global deployment process, which also includes the tasks of the step 2, extraction, anonymization, and injection. There is a reception step on the Azure infrastructure to prepare the test database to receive anonymized data. And that is why we find the wait-for type relationship between the two activities. The data can be injected only if the database is ready. I now move on to a short demo. I will first log into my Azure account to see the contents of the Drops TDM resource group. We see that there is no virtual machine on this group. Then, I open the Drops web console. On this console we have the deployment board where we have the history of all the deployments on the different environments configured on Drops. And I can from this board launch a new deployment. I choose my deployment process. The Drops release that I want to deploy and which contains my database update, here 2.0. And I launch my deployment. We see a new card that is displayed on the board, and there is the bar that tells us the progress of the deployment. This deployment starts the instantiation of the infrastructure on Azure. I then switch to Azure. And here I can see that the instantiation has triggered. After 2 minutes, I see that my deployment is successful. And the virtual machine has been created in the Drops TDM resource group. I access my machine details to retrieve the IP. I come back to my deployment board. And after 3 minutes 41 seconds, my deployment is successful. I can access the detailed logs of the deployment. I can see here the logs of all the steps of my process. I will now connect an SSH to my Azure machine to verify that my extracted and anonymized test data is on this machine. I select the data from the customer table. And here we can see the data of the 11 customers from France extracted from the production base. And their data is anonymized as defined in the anonymization project. We see, for example, that the addresses have been replaced by stars. I also run an SQL query to see all the tables in my test database, and we find the 13 tables related to my customers table that have been injected correctly. To conclude, in this video we have seen how to combine the 3 ARCAD tools, Drops, .anonymizer and .extract, to have ready-to-use test data in one click. Thank you, and do not hesitate to consult the websites of the 3 tools via the links under the video.